Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Dieter Kurtenbach, making his return to the podcast to do what has now become an annual tradition on the Game Theory Podcast, where Dieter and I give you our all NBA teams, our NBA award voting, everything like that. Neither of us actually have a vote, but I think both of us end up putting more time into this than many people who do have votes. So
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And this one was particularly tough. Like, this one required like several goddamn hours to even just come up with like one spot on a team. This was as tough as I can remember it ever being. Well, before we even started talking about it, I would always do this at the end of the year just for sort of clarity's sake. And man, this one was rough.
Well, like, injuries screwed everything up with this team.
For sure.
Like, Stephen Curry was on pace to have a season that was pretty equal to his MVP years. Mm-hmm. And he played 51 games. So, like, what do we do?
Yeah, I mean, there's one that we'll get to later where on the all-defense team, you probably know who it is, but, like, played 40 games. Like, can I put him on the list or not? This is a lot like when Embiid was that Rookie of the Year candidacy. How many games did he play that year? Something like 30-something? Yeah, it's really tricky, but this year seemed to be more of an avalanche of injury and intrigue than ever before.
Yeah, how's it going, though, before we get into all of this craziness? Is your life up in the Bay Area okay?
Yeah, I'm doing A-okay. Thank you for asking. I need these playoffs to start. You know, the Warriors have always been the bread and butter. That's what puts, I guess, bread and butter on the table for me. And I mean, like, it's been quite a slog since the seeds have been locked up. I mean, the chaos underneath it is interesting, but I can't really capitalize on it. No NFL going on, really. Baseball season is bleh. I forgot how boring baseball becomes after about a week. I mean, it's but the playoffs are going to be a bless, man. Like, this is going to be as good of a playoffs as I haven't been this excited about the NBA playoffs in a while. I think the coronation stage of the Warriors dynasty is over, and things are going to get real interesting on both sides of the bracket.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm really excited to see just how the Warriors deal with the malaise that they've played with over the course of the last 2 months, and then also just deal with the injuries. I mean, they're banged up right now. Stephen Curry's probably not going to play in the first round unless just insanity happens and they get pushed to, like, the limit. But
yeah, even then they'd probably be rushing him back before he's fully healthy. So, like, there's a lot of that going on where it's, you know, that Steph Curry will come back when he's needed. And the Warriors are hoping they don't need him anytime soon. But, you know, with the way that the West is shaping out, and we don't know who the 7 seed will be. They're locked in at the 2. It could be a real son of a bitch in the first round. But I mean, the other part too is I just love what's going on in the East. I mean, I still feel like the Cavs get out, but man, it's going to be a lot more fun this year than in prior years, I think.
The Eastern Conference is a total mess right now, and it's beautiful, and I'm enjoying every second of it. Let's go on ahead and get into this. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with MVP? Do you want to start all NBA?
Yeah. Let's start with MVP. I think that makes the most sense. And let's get that one out. I think that one's actually the easiest. I'm shocked by sort of the narrative that's been developing over these last couple of weeks because, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I have James Harden as my MVP, followed by Anthony Davis, Damian Lillard, then LeBron James, then Giannis. I'm not buying into the LeBron is the true MVP narrative that's developed sort of in the vacancy of Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant and over these last couple of weeks. What's your first off, what's your take on the whole LeBron late season push for MVP?
I think it's fair on some levels. You look at what LeBron has done to push this Cavs team to actually relatively solid position as a top 4 team in the East. This is a bad team right now. Like, not right now, but like, they've been a bad team throughout the course of the season. They're starting to come together a little bit. You just look at the wins and losses. Like, they've actually started to figure some things out other than that game against the 76ers. But, you know, LeBron is going to play every single game this year, 82 games for, I think, the first time in his career. He's going to average 27 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists, which is just bananas.
No, it's bonkers.
He's going to do it on a 62% true shooting percentage. He's going to do it on his best PER since 2014. And he's leading the NBA in value over replacement player. You look at just any of the advanced metrics offensively, and I think that you can come up with a realistic case for LeBron James. the problem is that he hasn't really given a shit about defense.
Right.
For
100%.
I would say more of the season than he has given a shit about defense.
Yeah.
And you can see it in his play, and on some level that's okay. We've largely over the years absolved James Harden, who is his biggest competition for this award, of his defensive deficiencies, right? But
right.
At the same time, whenever you're talking about defense, it's like, has James Harden been as good as LeBron this year defensively? Like, it's probably about right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference of LeBron could be an all-world defender if he applied himself on that end of the court.
And he is in, like, fourth quarters.
Right, but this year, more than any year that I can remember, and I don't think this is a recency bias thing, he has been taking just whole swatches of plays off, just periods at a time off, whereas James Harden, I don't think has the ability to do it, but when he applies himself, he can be, less than, a little bit better than terrible. So it's an issue of effort, but I have just a hard time making the argument for LeBron. His stats are incredible. No one's arguing the stats are incredible, but Russell Westbrook's stats are incredible. And the Cavs and the Thunder are kind of similar teams in my mind. They're kind of in the same tranche in my mind. And we're not having a conversation about Russell Westbrook winning the MVP, even though, if he probably pad his stats in the final game here, he'll probably end up with a triple-double again. When it's all said and done. If not, he finishes, 0.1 rebounds behind. That conversation's not happening. LeBron James is, of course, the forever most valuable player. He's arguably the greatest player of all time. He's number 2 on the list if he's not number 1. Every year you can make LeBron the MVP, but what actual value is coming out the other side of this? Like, the Cavs are markedly worse than they were last year. LeBron is playing markedly better. I have a hard time putting those two things together as a positive for him.
Well, I mean, there's a very clear answer as to why that is, though, right?
No, I get it. I get it 100%. But at the same time, if this guy is supposed to, what has he carried his team to? We've seen a lot of guys carry a lot of teams almost single-handedly to really high levels. I feel I feel like really shitty debating against LeBron James, but 6 weeks ago, we weren't having this conversation. It didn't exist. It was, LeBron will get third or fourth place votes based on the fact that he's LeBron James and does incredible shit every night. And he's arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. And of course, he's going to get votes, but he's not the MVP. And then over these last 6 weeks, I've just been watching. I don't know where this narrative started from. I don't know what the point that everyone started discussing this as a real possibility came into play. James Harden hasn't played any worse. Anthony Davis has been playing out of his gourd. Damian Lillard hasn't played any worse. So how did LeBron just leapfrog 2 of those guys, and in some cases 3 of those guys, to now be, at least the guy who's going to get the second most votes for MVP? I don't understand where that came from.
Yeah, look, I do have LeBron at second on my MVP list. I think that he's been the second best player in the NBA this year. James Harden, though, is literally doing things that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
Offensively, right? Like, he's averaging 30.6 points on a 62.1 true shooting percentage. That is literally unheard of. On
record number of isolations, too. So it's not as if he's some sort of a system guy. He is the system.
Right. And, I think Michael Jordan's the only other guy to go 30 with 60% true shooting percentage. Oh, yeah, and James Harden's doing it while averaging 9 assists a night, too.
Yeah.
He's literally having an absolutely historic offensive season, and I think that it's difficult to kind of line that up with the narrative of LeBron James. And LeBron James, if you were asking me who I wanted to start a team with, I would say LeBron over James Harden, no question. But we're talking about regular season value here, and I think that you have to default to the fact that James Harden is having what is genuinely a historic regular season. On
a historic team. This Rockets team, we're not talking about it enough, is one of the greatest regular season basketball teams of all time. And I have to think about every single day one of the all-time worst predictions I've ever made in my life, and Lord knows there's a few of them, saying that this would be a bottom 5 defensive team because they're like a top 6 defensive team in the NBA right now, just according to defensive rating. This is a really, really good team, and if not for the Warriors' dynastic run, they would be far and away the title favorites.
Yep.
I mean, there's just no question about it. But because the Warriors sandbagged an entire season, no one really knows what to get out of them. So it's a toss-up, I guess, between the two of those. Like, how good is that the Warriors, a team that before the season people were having realistic conversations about 74 wins and 16-0 playoff runs and the greatest team of all time, all of which aren't going to happen, obviously. But all of those conversations were happening, and then the Rockets, at the beginning of the playoffs, are going to be equal favorites to the Warriors. That's really, really, really impressive, and that has to go into the calculus when you take MVP into account. And so I just don't see the team value. I know that LeBron is out of this world, but he's not carrying his team to any new heights. If he wins Finals MVP, that's probably more of a reward for what he'll provide, right? Like, that's what he's going for. James Harden was, I thought, robbed out of the MVP last year by a bunch of people who got enamored with the triple-double, and I think that he's more than deserving of it this year, and it kind of pisses me off a little bit that we're trying to nitpick this one away from him, because, I have a hard time making an argument why he shouldn't be unanimous. Yeah,
I don't know if he's going to be unanimous. In fact, I think we know he's not. Yeah, because I think Jeff Zillgett said he's going to vote LeBron James.
Right. But, like, again, that just came out of nowhere, and it's kind of like those guys who don't vote in the Baseball Hall of Fame. They don't vote for a guy just because they don't think that guy should be unanimous. Like, I feel like I
don't think it's that bad.
Okay, but it's on those lines. Like, this is nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. I just don't know how you can make an argument that James Harden isn't the most valuable player in the NBA by the V in the name, value. He's on the best team. He's the best player on the best team, and he's having a historic offensive season for a historic team. Like, Steph Curry won 2 MVPs with that argument alone, and he deserved both of them. James Harden deserves the MVP this year.
I agree. I'm not going to dispute that with you necessarily. I think that it's probably pretty fair to say, though, that LeBron, 27.7 points, 9.2 assists on 62.1 true shooting. So, he's just off of the pace that James Harden is setting, but he's off the pace. He's a little bit off the pace. It's fair to say that.
He's off the pace, and his team is off the pace.
Yes. And the fact that pace too. The fact that they are so bad defensively, the fact that they are 29th in the NBA defensively, is a legitimate problem in LeBron's MVP case, I think. But I still have him second. I have Anthony Davis fourth, Damian Lillard, or I have Anthony Davis third, Damian Lillard fourth, and Giannis fifth. Do we think those are right?
I think I think I have the exact same 5 guys. The only question, came down to number 5. Did you give any other considerations to any other players over Giannis?
I did. I thought about Durant, to be honest. Ultimately, I just decided Giannis made a little bit more sense. He's outscoring him, out-rebounding him by a pretty significant margin. I think he's a better defender than what Kevin Durant is. They're pretty similar as playmakers at this stage, which kind of says a lot about where Durant has come as a playmaker. Maybe you could say that Durant is obviously a more efficient scorer, just like a dominant weapon with the ball in his hands, but I'd probably lean Giannis. Honestly, I think you can go either or and be totally fine.
I considered Durant. That would have been my first option. I also considered LaMarcus Aldridge, Stephen Curry, and then I even took a moment to just think it through. Victor Oladipo, and then Ben Simmons as well. With what Simmons has done, I know it kind of goes against what I was saying with LeBron and this late season push, but Simmons has been so awesome. Obviously, that was a very quick conversation with myself, but it is just amazing how good he's been that I thought, well, maybe we should try to talk ourselves into putting him fifth on the MVP ballot, but that's not going to happen. LaMarcus Aldridge, though, I do think probably deserves a couple of votes here. I'd be shocked if he didn't get them, but I just know that he has a lot of supporters out there with votes. But it's Giannis. It's Giannis or Durant, but I had to go with Giannis.
Sure. Do we want to go into All NBA next? Because I feel like that's
let's do it.
Probably
we're kind of already there.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with third team or do you want to start with first team?
Let's start first team, given the fact that we've kind of already said a lot of it.
Right.
So before we do that, let's kind of just jump into some of the issues that present themselves with this All NBA year.
Only a few.
So the first one is injuries. How do you deal with Stephen Curry, who's going to play 51 games? How do you deal with Chris Paul, who I think is going to play 57? Jimmy Butler is going to be right around 60, if I remember correctly. That makes it a little bit tricky. The second part for me was, how do you deal with the positions this year? Because for me, what I found is that there were an inordinate number of centers that I wanted to put on the list.
Yes.
So I ended up shifting a few of them who are eligible to be at forward to the forward spot. And it ended up being a case where, so I have Anthony Davis at forward on my first team All-NBA, which means I have Joel Embiid as my first team center.
Got you.
Thing is, though, like what this ends up doing is it ends up pushing Durant and Giannis to second team and pushing Aldridge to third team, because I wanted to put Aldridge on a team somewhere, but I also wanted to put Karl Towns on a team somewhere. Yeah. And despite the fact that Aldridge, by any measure, has been better than Karl Towns, Aldridge is third team, whereas Towns is second team.
Just because of positions.
It's just kind of a mess. So I ended up kind of game planning here a little bit more than probably what the intent of these awards are. Maybe.
Yeah. No, I get that. I kind of wish that the NBA would just correct me if I'm wrong if they don't do this, but I certainly am not familiar with it. I wish that the NBA would just declare what position a guy is. I know it would make a lot of people pissed off. They kind of do. But it's
because the way you vote, if I remember correctly, is it's like a drop down menu, and you just pick guys from the drop down, and if they're not present in that drop down menu, you can't pick them.
Yeah, so maybe we're just SOL on all of this, and all of our wonkiness is lost because the drop down menu doesn't agree. But I didn't have to do too much of that. I think there's only one case on this where it became an issue where I felt like I kind of rigged the system a bit, but there's a lot of really great players that I ended up leaving off, and I don't feel like I was aggressive or anything with this. I actually tried to be aggressive. I put together, my first list was I thought really aggressive, and then I realized it was actually pretty conservative given the amount of options available. I don't feel like anybody here is particularly out of place.
Yeah, I feel like I had 25 people whenever I narrowed it down at the top, and then really started hammering home, and I got down to about 17 or 18 that I felt pretty good about, and then had to kind of decide from there. Yeah,
I have 20 that I had to decide from, and some of them got really, really rough, and I might change my mind halfway through.
Yeah,
hearing yours, but,
not out of the question.
Let's start it off with the first team. Who do you got?
So I've got James Harden, Damian Lillard, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Joel Embiid.
Okay. My first team is the same, but I have Giannis instead of Embiid. I have Davis as my center. Lillard over what is a plethora of viable first-team guard options. I want to hear what you have to say about it, and I might chime in after.
So the reason that I have Lillard here is that, first and foremost, I gave deference to games played. So I think that we both agree that Stephen Curry this year, in the games that he played, was very clearly better than Damian Lillard, right? Yes. But I don't think he was 1.4 times better than Damian Lillard.
Right.
In terms of creating value. And then you look at just where this Portland team has gone over the course of the last really month and a half, 2 months. The fact that they're going to be the third seed in the West in all likelihood, they could end up being the 4, depending on what happens with Utah and them in their game, I believe, at the end of the year. Do they play, right?
Yeah.
It's just going to be fascinating to me on so many levels. So I ended up going with Lillard on the first team, in large part because I think that he is the most important player on a top 3 seed who had an incredible season in terms of scoring efficiency. He improved a little bit defensively as well, which I think
he really did.
Plays a big part in this. It's not that he is a wholly different player offensively. He's certainly a little bit better this year than he's been in the past, but the fact that he has improved his defense to where he is no longer just a total sieve is commendable to him, and I think that it pushes him into the point where he can be a first-team All-NBA member.
Yeah, I look at the impact that he has on that team and how that Portland team just seems to have a little extra oomph this year, and I attribute that directly to him taking his game to the next level. It was said, I can't remember who said it, but a couple of days ago, maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, someone said that if you trade Damian Lillard for Stephen Curry, the Warriors wouldn't miss a beat. And I know a bunch of Warriors fans and commentators and all kind of got really peeved about that. That's actually bananas. It's bananas. It's bananas. Don't get me wrong. I'm not agreeing with it, but I do think that sentiment is closer to being on point than it ever has been. Lillard's impact on a defense, particularly, it's always been incredible, but this season he's really stretched his three-point shot out. He's finishing better at the rim. His inside-out game has just created a lot more opportunities for a Blazers team that probably has overperformed all year. And I look at Lillard as sort of the straw that stirs the drink there, and the opportunities that he creates for others around him. That's where I've seen his game take the largest jump, in not necessarily even just dribble drive stuff, just in impact and influence on the court. I think that he just had a really tough year in the sense of there were so many great MVP candidates and so many great NBA first team candidates that I don't know if he's going to end up on the first team like you and I have him. But I thought it was imperative to have him on this first team.
Yeah, no, generally I agree. I mean, if we want to get into the comparison game here, I think that the guy that I left him off for, or the guy that I left off for Lillard, was probably Russell Westbrook. Okay. I mean, from a numerical perspective, I think that you can certainly make the case for Russ. Right. Russ is averaging 25.6 points, 9.9 rebounds, 10.1 assists. He's 16 rebounds in his final game away from averaging a triple-double for the second consecutive season. The problem for me is that it didn't seem like he did nearly enough to end up getting that Thunder team to congeal in the way that its talent says it should, first and foremost. Second, His defense was, I think, even worse than Lillard's this year, to be honest.
It was real bad.
And then third, I mean, he's going to have a 2.5 or 3% below average true shooting percentage because he continues to take all of these terrible 3-point attempts. He still is chucking from the mid-range at a pretty substantial level. He actually shot a little bit worse from free throw range this year, 74%. Ends up costing him a couple of points per game in the end of the day. Or at least 1 point per game at the end of the day if he was up around what his average has been in the past. I totally understand that, we're talking about a guy who has a 50% assist rate in addition to, a pretty respectable turnover rate, although his turnover rate is worse than any of the other All-NBA guards this year. I understand that his defensive rebounding rate is more than Stephen Curry and DeMar DeRozan's combined. But,
yes.
At the end of the day, there's more to it than numbers. And I think that Westbrook's inability to adapt to those around him is just a small negative. It's not like an overwhelming negative. He's still going to be a second-team All-NBA guy for me. But it's just enough to have Damian push up over him, in my opinion.
Totally agree with that. I actually, the tougher question was about Lillard or Curry, because as you mentioned earlier, Curry, it was having a very similar statistical year. His impact can't be overstated.
Sure.
Similar statistical year to his MVP years. But again, the number of games really just kind of did him in there.
In minutes. I mean, Damian's going to play over 1,000 more minutes than Stephen Curry this year. That's like a full rotational player worth of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And then beyond that, the Warriors just didn't perform as well as they should have this year, at least compared to expectations. And they were never going to reach the expectations. The expectations were sky high and unrealistic, but just underperforming. And it's undebatable that the Warriors underperformed this year. Just kind of knocks you down a notch. In the same realm as my argument for James Harden, it's the same one that I have putting Stephen Curry on the second team. As it relates to Westbrook, it goes back to the argument I made for Lillard, impact, and particularly positive impact. And that will always be my knock on Russell Westbrook, that he does not have a positive team impact. He does not make the guys around him particularly better, and his game is sometimes far too complicated to get the best out of his teammates. And we've seen that on display this year.
Here's what I'll say about that. I don't know that he makes his teammates better or worse necessarily, but he unquestionably makes his team better. You know what I mean?
Compared to a replacement player or something, but like in terms, he's an unbelievably explosive player. There's no limit to what he can do with the basketball in his hands on the court, but it's so much of a me show, and it's just clear. I mean, the dude stat hunts all year, and that kind of stuff just has a wear and tear. And you can see sort of the the golden idol worship, if you will, in Oklahoma City. The way that Steven Adams just lets them get every board. And they've all come to just admit that this is the way things are. And I just watch this team, and I watch it when it plays well, and man, they're unbelievable. I mean, they're honestly a title contending team when they're playing really, really well. And the thing that always stops them from playing really, really well is that Russ goes out and tries to do something for Russ. And that's just the kind of stuff that looms a lot larger in my mind than it actually exists in the real world, but it's stuff that I can't get over. And when you see Dame Lillard, who had a little bit of that tendency, and still does, but had a little bit of that tendency in his early years, and kind of moving away from that, kind of going more to the Curry style of play where influence is more important than impact. I just have a hard time not taking Dame, who is obviously helping his team in so many ways, than Russ, who kind of needs to be the hammer that hits the nail and refuses to hand it off to anybody else.
Yeah, I do understand that to just about every extent possible. I'm going to be stronger on it than most. It's just it super frustrates me. I don't know why. Sure, I mean, it's worth mentioning that like Oklahoma City's offense was 11 points better when Russ was on the floor, or per 100 possession when Russ was on the floor. Lillard's, again, like his effect is similar. Like they're 7 points better when he's on the floor. And their offensive efficiency as a whole is about the same as Oklahoma City's when Damian Lillard is on the floor versus when Russell Westbrook is on the floor for Oklahoma City. So it's kind of a question of backups. Like, you know, Shabazz Napier this year, for all of his warts and the fact that they sometimes just hand the ball to CJ McCollum whenever Dame goes to the bench, like that's going to inflate the on-off numbers in terms of him being off the floor. But, you know, at the same time, like Russ's impact is just so categorical that it's insane. Do we want to talk about the forwards at all? Do we need to?
I mean, we don't need to talk about it, but I had Kevin Durant and LaMarcus Aldridge on this second team. Or are we talking still about the first team?
Well, first team, like LeBron, we've already talked extensively about. We probably haven't given Anthony Davis his shine this year, or in this podcast at least. AD has just been insane in the way that he has led this Pelicans team back to the playoffs despite DeMarcus Cousins being out. I think you and I both said at the beginning of the season we thought Alvin Gentry was probably going to be shit-canned by Thanksgiving. So the fact that Anthony Davis has led this team 28.2 points per night, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.5 steals, 2.6 blocks, did it on 54% from the field, 34% from three, 84% from the foul line, 29 PER. Just so incredibly worthy of a first-team All-NBA showing here. This is going to be his third time being first-team All-NBA, and it's just absolutely categorically deserved.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. He has been wholly dominant since Cousins went down. This is not that great of a team around him. I will say some stuff about Drew Holiday later, who's been really quite excellent in a healthy season this year. But you look around him. This is the Davis show, and for him to be as impactful as he's been on both ends of the court, this is, I guess, what we sort of always expected from him since he came out as the number 1 overall pick. But hot damn, man, this is some next level stuff, and it's kind of similar to the Lillard argument. Like, he picked a really crappy year to have the best year of his career and for MVP candidacy, because James Harden and LeBron James are doing just incredible stuff. But AD deserves all the adulation you can get him and more. I'm fascinated to see who the Pelicans line up with in the playoffs, because they're going in hot. I mean, with the way that AD is playing and the way that team is gelling around him. But he's next level, man, and there really wasn't even a question in my mind that he was the first team center.
So you have Embiid's second team, correct?
Yes.
So let's talk about Embiid as kind of like the floating guy here. And like I said, the reason I have Embiid here is because there were more centers than forwards that I wanted to get involved in this All-NBA team. So I kind of game theoried it out a little bit. Yeah. Shout out to the show's title. But like Embiid this year has just been remarkable. 23 points a night, 11 rebounds, 3 assists. He's knocking down 3-pointers at a not great rate, but
30% clip.
At least he is capable of taking them, and defenders for some reason seem to still defend him out there.
Right.
Been the second best defender in the NBA this season for my money. You just look at the effect that he has on that side of the floor. It is just totally remarkable. What do we think of Joel Embiid in season 2 and whether or not he can lead the Sixers on this incredible run toward the playoffs?
Yeah, well, I mean, as we talk, I believe the Sixers have won 14 straight games with a good chunk of them being without Joel Embiid. So clearly he has a lot of talent around him. Ben Simmons has been playing out of his mind. Been getting some help, to be fair, from the schedule makers. At the same time, Embiid is turning into the player, and he's still, it's early in his career. He's 23 years old. He hasn't, yet to play a full season in the NBA. In all reality, this is the guy that we thought he could be. There's a lot of refinement that can still be done, but the defensive impact is real. It's there. If it gets any better, that's a scary proposition for the rest of the league. His offensive game is, I think, a lot more polished than I thought it might be. And if he can become more efficient on that end of the court, especially with that jump shot, which is just, you want to talk in NFL, college football, we always talk about defensive coordinators' worst nightmares. We don't really have defensive coordinators per se, but there's a lot of coaches who are on staffs just for defensive game planning. They're defensive coordinators in my mind, and this guy's a defensive coordinator's worst nightmare. I don't know who the hell you put on him to stop him from scoring. The moves in the low post are just, he's inside out in the way that, a lot of big guys these days are. Maybe we get that all lost in the shuffle because of all these unicorns that we see out there. But he's as good as it gets when it comes to sort of that class of player. And for him to have the same level of impact on the defensive side of the ball, if not a better or stronger impact on that side of the ball, makes this guy, I think, a perennial MVP candidate so long as he stays on the court going forward. So this might be the last time in a while that he's on the second team, even with all these great centers we have in the league right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got him on the first team. I think there's a chance he ends up on the first team, depending on what happens with Anthony Davis's voting.
Right. Let's
go on ahead and move on to the second team overall. Russell Westbrook, Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, Giannis, and Karl Towns for me. Like I said, part of this is just like game theoried out in so many ways. Like I have Jimmy Butler and LaMarcus Aldridge on the third team. I would say both are better than Towns, but I wanted to get centers. I thought that the drop-off from the center position was much lower than the drop-off at the forward position, and I wanted to get more of them on.
So run me through the second team one more time here real fast.
I've got Russ and Steph, who we've both talked about.
Right.
I've got Kevin Durant and Giannis. We've kind of talked about Kevin a little bit. We should probably talk a little bit more about him and Giannis here. And then I have Towns at center. Who is your second team?
Yeah, my second team is Durant and LaMarcus Aldridge at forward. I know LMA might get some run at center. He's a forward in my mind still, just with the way San Antonio plays. I have Embiid as my center. Westbrook and Curry, same with you, as the second team guards.
So let's kind of jump into. Do we want to talk about? Let's talk about Steph. We talked a little bit about Russ here at the top. Let's talk about the year that Stephen Curry had. So Stephen Curry averages 26.6 assists, 5 rebounds, and he does it on a 67.5 true shooting percentage, which I did not know was physically possible until Stephen Curry existed. It's possible.
It's happened. Yeah, this guy has a 61.8 effective field goal percentage.
Yeah, he's insane. He's not human in any capacity. He is just unbelievable, and I don't know even how to begin to comprehend what he does when he's on a basketball floor offensively. Well-earned second team here for me, just in 51 games. He is that good.
That's really the only kicker on it. If he had played the entire year, I think that he would have gotten into the top 5 of MVP voting.
Yeah.
Or not, because Durant would have somehow, Durant's numbers would have gone up with Curry on the floor and all that stuff, and they would have canceled each other out. But as we've now mentioned a couple of times now, he's putting together numbers that are not as good as the 2015-16 season, which was arguably the greatest offensive year in NBA history until what James Harden's doing right now. If we want to have that debate, we can. He just missed 50, 40, 90 again. Missed it by 0.05 field goal percentage points. He is the Warrior system personified. He's the one who has sort of turned them into this offensive juggernaut. And as great as Houston's offense has been, when Curry and when the Warriors were healthy, and they had Curry and Durant and Clay and Draymond and all them on the floor together, it was just as good of an offense, if not better, than what Houston's put on the court all year. Obviously, sample size matters, but we had two historic offenses on display at the same time this season, and Curry deserves a lot of credit for that. I think switching it over quickly to Durant, because I do think they're kind of tied at the hip here in many ways. There was a stretch there for the first couple of months when Durant was not only going to be a first-team player, I thought he was the front-runner for MVP and a possible Defensive Player of the Year winner. He was playing out of his role on both sides of the court, sort of capped off on that Christmas win over the Cavs without Curry. That has faded significantly in my mind, but he's still one of the greatest scorers, not only in the NBA, but in NBA history. He's ruthless, man. I as much as his defense has faded, and a lot of that just has to do with taking plays off in the same way that LeBron has, getting ready for the playoffs and not wanting to expend too much energy. You still have to give him credit for what he did earlier in the season, and that doesn't mean he gets into the MVP voting, but it was a no-brainer second team selection. You can easily make the argument that he's a first team guy. Ultimately, I wanted Giannis on my first team over Durant just because, again, of the struggles, if you will, that the Warriors have had this season as compared to sort of what the Bucks have been able to do with Giannis as the fulcrum.
Sure. And do you have Towns on any of your teams?
No.
So I actually don't blame you there on that.
That's tough. I literally am looking at my sheet right now, and there's 7 different crossing out of names between him and Jokic on the third team center. So sure. I went with Jokic eventually.
So let's talk about Towns, since we're not going to get a chance to again here. 21 points, 12 rebounds, shoots 54% from the field, 42% from three, 86% from the line. He's going to be a legit 7'1", 250-pound center to go 50, 40, 90 at some point. And it's going to be bonkers when he does it. 64.6 true shooting percentage. His defense got better as the season went on. He's still not going to be confused with an incredible defensive player, but his offensive progression has just been totally remarkable to me. He is just an absolute monster, and it infuriates me whenever the Timberwolves just go long swaths of games with letting Andrew Wiggins do his thing instead of Karl Towns. The fact that Andrew Wiggins is taking 16 shots a game and Karl Towns is taking 14 shots a game is the most bananas thing in the NBA. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's Tom Thibodeau for you. He's insane on the offensive end. There is no answer for him, but and he's so good offensively that he's not a net zero player. I just have a really hard time overlooking the prodigious amount of defensive deficiencies that
I don't think it's prodigious anymore, though.
It's still bad, man. I mean, it's rough out there for sure. I don't want to harp too much on it, because at this point it should be sort of a known entity, and you're right, it has improved year over year, but and you don't want to take away from a kid this talented. He's 22 years old. It's not like he's a finished product or anything, but he still has a long way to go on that end of the court to get to average. That's my stance on it. And so much, the Timberwolves are a bad defensive team. A lot of that has to do with Wiggins. A lot of it has to do with Towns as well. You're 100% right that giving Wiggins 18 and Towns 14 is asinine, but they both pull their weight on the defensive end of things. If he can take another step forward defensively next year and keep these offensive numbers, he's on the team. But the tiebreaker that I had in my mind between Jokic and Towns for the third team center spot just came down, and Jokic is not necessarily a good defender either, but came down to impact, how much better Jokic makes his teammates through passing, and ultimately Denver. I just feel like he has less help in Denver than Towns has in Minnesota, with the addition of Jimmy Butler, who was outstanding this season for the Timberwolves.
Sure, I totally get all of that. I think it's fair. At the end of the day, I think that his defense is considerably better than you do. I don't think it's it's not a positive, but I think it's gotten to the point where it's pretty close to a net zero. And I mean, you know what? Early in the season, though, it wasn't. So his overall defensive impact is probably slightly negative. But to me, it's nowhere near as bad as what Jokic's defense is.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. But his his influence in the game. Jokic's passing, maybe I'm just overly enamored with it, but what he's able to do out of the high post is really next level. And the way that the Nuggets are ending the season, this one I'll admit is recency bias.
Sure.
He's been playing so well down the stretch here, pulling the Nuggets into the playoffs or getting them a chance to go into the playoffs here. Maybe the third team all center or third team all NBA center spot goes down to who wins on Wednesday in that Nuggets Timberwolves game. Whoever plays better in that game will get the spot. But for now, having just watched both of them play last night, it's Jokic.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I've got Jokic at third team already, so I've got both of them on.
Yeah, but you left a couple of people off that we'll get to in a minute.
I did. So I've got Victor Oladipo, DeMar DeRozan, Jimmy Butler, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Nikola Jokic is my third team. Who do you have?
I have Paul George, who, for as much as he has been sort of mercurial this season, has been outstanding on the defensive end and just a really solid two-way player. DeMar DeRozan, I think it'd be really difficult to leave him off of an All-NBA team this year. Still a lot of things in his game that I'm not personally a fan of, but he took a huge step forward this year, in my opinion, and the Raptors having the number one seed in the East, someone had to be on the team. I also had Victor Oladipo, who I think deserves some love for MVP. It's kind of getting the fifth vote there. I think he's been the best two-way player in the NBA this year, and he's my most improved player, to jump the gun there a little bit. I have I have whoever wins on Wednesday. Jokic as my center, and then I put Ben Simmons as a forward on my third team. What he's been able to do for the Sixers squad without Embiid, and even with Embiid, but getting the Sixers to 50-plus wins without a jump shot. I mean, just the impact that he has on the game is quite impressive for such a young player. I know he's been in the league for a year but didn't play and all that stuff. And we'll get to that debate a little bit more in depth later when it comes down to Rookie of the Year. But and I think you can probably figure out who I voted for. But Simmons's impact, and that's the word I keep coming back to, was immense for the Sixers this year, and I felt it'd be remiss not to have him on the 13.
Yeah, I think it's fair to have him there. He was my first cut of the forwards, so to me, I wanted to get Jokic on.
That's a totally fair thing. Like if you're getting both, Towns was my first cut as I've gone through. But Towns and Jokic are centers. If Simmons is a forward, I guess you could even put him in as a guard. But just going through, I have four other names here of guys that were really difficult to cut. Starting with Jimmy Butler, Kyrie Irving, Chris Paul, and I gave serious consideration to Bradley Beal as well for what he's been able to do. He's second in the NBA in secondary assists, a stat that I think speaks a lot to what a player can do for a team. And I know that the Wizards have been sort of shit in the bed for the last few weeks, but I thought Bradley Beal was immense in that stretch of time they had to play without John Wall, and I think they might be better without John Wall if Bradley Beal is playing the way that he played without him on the court. So that was a really tough cut, but
there's no way that's true.
You don't think so?
No way.
I don't know, man. I like the style of play that they had without Wall on the court.
But the problem is that then they went on to lose like 8 of 12.
You're right.
In that last big stretch without Wall.
Yeah, it's they just don't.
It's aesthetically pleasing.
It's very aesthetically pleasing, and it's funny when you look at like assist percentage. I was spending some time today looking just at team assist percentage. Teams with high assist percentage, you go, okay, yeah, the Warriors are very high on the list and all that stuff. A lot of the more aesthetically pleasing teams, which I think is probably directly correlated to assist percentage, not very good, like the Nets and the Wizards. So that sort of shattered my notion there. Still, I think Bradley Beal played well enough to merit consideration, but I don't think he was ever going to get on this team.
Sure. So let's talk about Oladipo. Oladipo had an absolutely incredible season. We'll talk about him a little bit more in the most improved, as you mentioned. I think that he's going to be a no-brainer there. 23 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds. Really, the biggest place where he improved was his ability to knock down shots off of the dribble. It totally changed the way that he was able to operate offensively. If that's going to continue going forward, the sky's kind of the limit for him as a legitimate number one option for Indiana, in a way that I think they were just hoping to get a secondary option whenever they traded Paul George next to Miles Turner. But I think that Oladipo is just kind of taking the mantle as the guy now. And the reason that I have both Victor Oladipo and DeMar DeRozan over a guy like Chris Paul at this stage is just because of minutes played. Chris Paul had an incredible season as well. I think he's leading the NBA in real plus minus right now.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it came down to the fact that he's going to play about 700 minutes less than Victor Oladipo, and he's going to play about 800 minutes less than DeMar DeRozan. That's a lot of value to me, and I just don't think that he was that much better than what they were whenever he was on the floor. Oladipo, again, just a monster on defense too. I think he's leading the NBA in steals and steal percentage. Just has absolutely been remarkable in how he has totally improved every facet of his game.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of guys who statistically stack up on the offensive side with Oladipo. That's not to say anything negative. That's an incredible positive for Oladipo. But the defense, he's so goddamn good on defense. You'd be remiss to leave him off this list. I think it creates a pretty easy tiebreaker for everybody but say Jimmy Butler. Man, and then you take into account what the Pacers were able to do this year with Oladipo being the dude. Really, really hard. You could make the argument for him to be on the second team over Westbrook. It would be a difficult one, but you could make that argument.
Sure.
It'd be shameful, I think, if he doesn't make an All NBA team this year.
Yeah. It's really hard in a lot of ways because I think there are so many more guards than there are forwards, and 100%. I think that there are more than 3 centers that are better than the 6 forwards this year.
Yeah.
And it's just really hard to get everyone on there. We haven't yet talked about LaMarcus Aldridge, though, in a pretty significant way, and I think that we should do that, too. LaMarcus Aldridge this season, I think he maybe is having the best year of his career. You can probably make a couple of cases for a couple of the Portland seasons, but 23 points a night, 8.5 rebounds. He's expanded his range a little bit. He's out to 51% from the field, despite the fact that he's taking, I believe, more threes than ever, if not more than really close.
Well, other than the last year in Portland. But it's close. And he's at a whopping 29% this year. So,
and the big thing here, too, is he's got a true shooting percentage that is his absolute best in his career at 57.1%. You throw that into the mix with the fact that he's an awesome offensive rebounder, and he's carrying the load for a San Antonio team that really has no business being in the playoffs, in my opinion.
That's the biggest thing.
Beyond just having him and Greg Popovich. So I had to get him somewhere. Realistically, I think he's been a top 10 player in the NBA this season. Mm-hmm. I wish that I could have him second team, but because of the way that I laid out my teams to kind of get everyone there that I wanted to get on the teams, I think that he'll have to kind of settle for being a third team guy. Yeah,
I had him on my second team just because I didn't get as funky with the center versus forward as you did. It comes back to that statement. This Spurs team should not be making the playoffs, save for LaMarcus Aldridge. And it's really easy to, sort of take shots at LMA. And Lord knows I've taken more than a few of them. His game is what it is. It's not next level stuff. It's not as impactful as, in this era of guard play, what we see from guys who have the ball in their hands all the time and are moving around a lot and just making shit happen all over. And he's not necessarily the most efficient guy in the world, but what he's good at, he's really good at. And the Spurs have really leaned on that this year, more than ever before, obviously. And I think you're right. I mean, other than that last season in Portland, this has been the best season of his career. And he's been super impactful in ways that you don't really necessarily correlate with impact. So I had him on the second team. I think that he should get some MVP votes as well, just for what he's been able to do for the Spurs. I'm fascinated to see where he falls ultimately with the people who actually have clout and say in this whole thing, because some people have written him off altogether as as sort of a superstar level player or whatever you want to call it. He got back to that level that he had been at, no doubt, this year. I'm wondering if enough people took notice.
You know what? I think that they do. I really just kind of think that he is someone that kind of gets unfairly shit on a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
At the same time, people who are around the league constantly, I think, really understand his effect. And the last point here I want to make is on Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic is averaging 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists a game this year, while having a 60% true shooting percentage. Yeah. The last person to do that is Wilt Chamberlain in 1967.
That's why he's on my third team until Wednesday.
Yeah. He's really good. He's just insane. The defense is a legitimate issue. I think that it's going to be hard for Denver to build a very real defense around him going forward. I mean, we've seen that this year. Like, Paul Millsap has probably taken a small step back defensively from where he was, but Gary Harris has taken a pretty big step forward defensively. And Jamal Murray is a pretty decent point guard defender, and they've still just struggled defensively with Jokic on the floor. There's probably a ceiling to how good you can be with him, but unless you just have elite perimeter defenders. But at the same time, his overall offensive impact is just so vast that you absolutely have to consider it, and I think you really need to have him on the third team here. And what I could have done here was move LaMarcus Aldridge to second team center, put Karl Towns as third team center, moved Jokic off, put Ben Simmons on. Ultimately, I decided that I think Jokic for now is probably just slightly better than Simmons due to the efficiency, due to the way that he kind of carries that team, just when it's only him as the guy. Whereas when Embiid is out, Simmons can struggle a little bit, as we saw early in the season. He's gotten a lot better over the course of this 14-game run of kind of carrying the load when Embiid is off the floor. But, for Denver, it was Jokic all year, and he was the guy who really carried the load.
Yeah. The toughest one for me was Butler and Simmons, which I'm not even sure what I tried to get Butler in as a guard. I don't know about that, but
well, he's played 80% of his minutes at shooting guard this year.
Yeah, I know, but that's a Thibodeau thing. So, Butler's been great. I went with the impact of Simmons and the overachievement, if you will, of Philadelphia. But again, going back to what I said when we got started here, this shit was tough. This was really hard.
It's a really hard year. And Al Horford should probably be there somewhere.
Right? Yes, Al Horford should probably be there somewhere. But, I mean, is he a center? Is he a forward? Is he a guard? I mean, I don't know if I want to call for, they need to change the way all NBA team voting is done because, they did that with the All-Star game because they didn't think there were enough centers, and now there's too many good centers, and they're all kind of fucked out of a good spot. But, yeah, man, this speaks to how fun the playoffs should be because I'm just looking here real fast. I don't think any of these guys, every single one of these guys, save for perhaps Towns
or Towns,
are going to be in the playoffs. And hot damn, let's boogie.
Yeah, let's go on ahead and move on. Let's go to. Do you want to go to Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, Defensive Player of the Year. My guy is Rudy Gobert. I think.
Agreed.
This has been the least inspiring Defensive Player of the Year battle last year. Maybe this is just coming back to the mean from last year when the Draymond Gobert argument was hot and heavy. But what Gobert's been able to do since he's come back in the lineup and leading this Jazz team not only into the playoffs but perhaps home court in the playoffs, and they've just been on an incredible run as of late. And I think they're the only sub 100 defensive rating in the NBA in the last couple of months. So just immense impact for what he does on the defensive end. And ultimately, the guys that were going to make a run at this award instead of him, Oladipo, Paul George, maybe Drew Holiday, maybe DeJounte Murray, maybe Anthony Davis, maybe Draymond Green. There are just a lot of maybes there. I had a hard time coming up with the second option.
Well, the second guy is Embiid, I think, pretty clearly. For me, at least. I considered Embiid for the award, but what it came down to for me is that, you think of the fact that Rudy missed quite a bit of time throughout the course of the year. And then you actually look at the minute totals that Embiid and Gobert have played, and it's only like 100 more minutes that Embiid has played than Gobert. It's really kind of negligible. And just with the way that Gobert shuts down the rim, the way he's a little bit better out in space, in my opinion, defensively.
He has gotten better.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot better there. I mean, he'll still be prone to getting hit a little bit, like against smaller guards, but he's gotten better.
I'd like to branch off of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fast. I mean, the real tricky part of this for me is the fact that I don't believe that a player like Gobert or a player like Embiid, just sort of a primary rim protector that has to come out to play again. Because I think Gobert's going to get eaten alive by small ball lineups in the playoffs. I just think that that's locked in, and we've seen it time and time again. In this era of versatility and wing-heavy play, I want to give the award to somebody who can guard all five positions. I want to give the award to because I think that's the guy who creates the most defensive impact, and that's the guy who should, who can affect the game most on that end of the court. I don't think that Oladipo is a five-guy defender. He was really, really good this season, as we said before. I think Draymond didn't really engage on defense for large portions of the year. When he's on, it's spellbinding, but this was not even close to his best defensive year. Paul George is a really good two-way player. I don't know if the defense is good enough to stand out on its own. I had a hard time finding, without Kawhi Leonard playing all year, I had a really hard time finding that versatile wing five-position defender that I want to give this award to because I believe that's the most important defensive role that you can have. So Gobert kind of wins almost by default. I don't want to take anything away from him. At the same time, he's the I truly believe the best at what he does. I just think that what he does has sort of been devalued in this era of the NBA. And I don't feel I felt a little bit torn about maybe rewarding that role.
I'm honestly not sure that it is. I don't know that I agree with you there. And the reason that I would say that is mostly just because of the way that he affects the way that opponents kind of attack the floor, right? He's so impactful in terms of just dissuading players from wanting to shoot three or from wanting to shoot at the rim. Teams just don't want to go in there. Like the fact that Utah is, I want to say, in the top 10 in mid-range field goal attempts allowed per game says a lot. Like teams just don't flat out want to go in there. They're third in allowing the fewest shots in the restricted area per game at 24.7. Teams just don't want to go in there. Top 10 in defensive field goal percentage against in the restricted area. They just do such a good job of kind of dissuading teams from doing what they want to do, and they force teams into doing what Utah wants them to do. Absolutely. In large part because of what Gobert brings to the table. Top 10 in the paint, non-restricted area jump shots, field goal attempts. Those are really difficult shots that Gobert affects a lot of, in the fact that teams are shooting 37% against them and are taking so many of them says a lot about what Rudy does defensively. The fact that they're in the top 10 of all of these metrics is in large part because of the effect that Gobert has on the floor, and in large part because of the way that they get back defensively, and in large part because of what Quinn Snyder has built in terms of their defensive identity. But at the same time, Gobert is just such an impactful player even when he's not blocking shots or affecting shots at the rim, because teams just don't want to even come close to attacking at the basket. Right. But again, and this is a no-win thing, because the NBA game today is the three-point shot and at the rim. And we're now seeing maybe a little bit more mid-range stuff just because that's the way the tides go. But, course correction. Correct. And it's there's always going to be that ebb and flow. He's immense in the middle. There's no player that patrols that area as well as Rudy Gobert. I just know of ways to get him off the court if I really need to, and that makes it difficult for a guy. It just makes it a little bit twinged for me, if you will. I don't know what the right word is there, but and the fact that he hasn't played a full season. This was a tricky one.
though it was almost an easy one at the same time. I don't know. There just wasn't somebody who truly stood out. And so when you go back to that, I mean, Gobert has had the biggest impact on his team's defense, and he's on, I would say, if not the single best, one of the best defenses in the NBA. I think that it locks it up for him right there.
Yeah, no, I think that he's the pick here. And we could have gone Embiid. Embiid is certainly incredibly impactful in the same way that Gobert is, but I think that Gobert is just slightly better at protecting the rim and slightly more impactful in terms of dissuading players from wanting to go into the rim.
Right. I don't even know if it's slightly. I mean, listen, Embiid is an incredible defensive player, but Gobert's the gold standard when we're talking about that kind of center.
Yeah.
And who else was on your first team?
So my defensive player of the year vote would be Rudy Gobert, Joel Embiid, Al Horford. In terms of my first team, I went with, I believe, Drew Holiday, Victor Oladipo, Al Horford, Draymond Green, and Rudy Gobert.
Okay. I had this is one of the twinges that I had, and I had Jimmy Butler playing as a guard, even though I really think he's a small forward. I had Butler, Oladipo, Gobert, Draymond, and Paul George as my first team, and it was really, really difficult to not put Drew Holiday on there, but I like Butler's versatility more, and that was sort of the tiebreaker.
Sure, I honestly think that's fair. I mean, my second team is DeJounte Murray, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis, Paul George, Joel Embiid. So George was incredible defensively. I think that he just was slightly off throughout the course of the post-All-Star break section of the year, both in terms of his shooting efficiency and in terms of his defensive acumen. Having Andre Robertson around really helped him. And speaking of Robertson, I really wanted to get Robertson on one of these teams. I think he's the best perimeter defender in the NBA, but
undebatable. He
played 39 games, and that gets really tough, I think.
That was the biggest thing, because he was a first-team player. I mean, there's just no doubt in the 40 games that he was.
I think he might have won Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, he would have been Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah. I don't even know if we'd have that argument. I honestly, if he played all 80, not only would the Thunder be a much better team, but he would probably have been the Defensive Player of the Year. But there's a lot of really good players right now, so playing less than half a season makes it really, really tough. I don't know how to feel about it. If someone wants to put him on the first team, I wouldn't complain. If someone wants to vote for him for, Defensive Player of the Year, I could justify that with enough money behind it. I could be that guy's lawyer. I couldn't get him on. Not with the way that Drew Holiday. I have Drew Holiday and DeJounte Murray as second teamers. I mean, I have Anthony Davis and Al Horford as second teamers. I have Embiid as second teamers. These guys are all probably that might be the first team other than Gobert. Really good year for everybody else, but that number one pick was tough, and not having Robertson out there for half the year is going to make these 10 spots even tougher to determine. Someone really good is going to get left off of one of these two teams, and for the life of me, out of the 10 guys that I have, other than Gobert and probably Embiid, I have no idea who it's going to be.
So I want to bring up DeJounte Murray real quick. The Spurs are 8 points better defensively with him on the floor. They are a 100.9 defensive rating when he's on the floor. I believe that's best in the NBA. 80.4 defensive rating when he's on the floor as compared to 77.3 because he's such a good rebounder from the point guard position. Much better steal percentage, much better block percentage when he's on the floor. He's just a genuinely extremely impactful defender in large part due to his length, 6'5", 6'10" wingspan, dominates guys at the point of attack just because it's really tough to get around him, and he's very, very good and disruptive with his hands.
Yeah, he's just another. The Spurs have a really good defense. You kind of look at that team and you kind of wonder how that's the case in a lot of ways. Obviously, they have a couple of guys there that are still really good and pop runs as good of a system as there exists in the league. But Murray at the point of attack, just been awesome this year. And I that's a storyline that honestly went under the radar. As much as LMA has created a really positive impact for that team, and, gotten them into the playoffs when, as you said, they didn't have any business getting there. Murray has been that important defensively to that team. And I don't know if it means anything in the long run, but the streak continues, and he has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and Drew Holiday, we just mentioned how good DeJounte Murray was.
Drew Holiday's been so good, man. I feel really shitty leaving him off the first team.
They're 9 points better when he's per 100 possession when he's on the floor defensively. Like, he is just a monster, and he was forced to guard so many different positions. He had to guard 1 through 3 regularly this year because of the way that New Orleans created their lineups. I mean, he was a monster this year defensively, and I just hope he gets the credit that he deserves finally, because if I remember correctly, I don't believe he has ever made one of these teams, and he has for a long time been one of the best defensive players in the NBA at the guard position.
Yeah, no question. I still like Jimmy Butler just a little bit more, but I feel real crappy about that. I'm probably going to change my mind as soon as I hang up.
Yeah, I mean, how about this too? I mean, Drew Holiday is going to go 19 points, 6 assists, 4.5 rebounds a game with all NBA level defense in 80 games a year. Like, that's living up to the contract that he
100%,
signed. That is
100%.
Like, legitimately worthy of that $25 million a year contract that he signed. And it's a credit to him that he has developed his game to this level.
Yeah, it's great too, because he's a great guy, and of all the shit that happened to him over the last 2 years or so, it's great. I wish that he had more talent. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say this because he has Anthony Davis on his damn team. I wish he had more talent around him so that the Pelicans could go on a bit deeper of a run in this postseason, because those two guys they're now in that echelon of 1-2 punch elite players, if you will. That's a hell of a duo that they have in New Orleans. I don't know if it will amount to anything when it's all said and done, but Drew Holiday deserves a lot of praise for what he was able to do for New Orleans this year, a team that perhaps more than any other team, at least in my eyes, exceeded expectations in 2017-18, even more so than Indiana. I don't know who else would do the Rockets. I thought the Pelicans were going to be dead and buried by Christmas, and even with all the crap that happened, here they are playing in the playoffs.
Let's move on to Coach of the Year. I have 3 guys here. Who do you got?
I have 3 guys as well. I gave you 5, but I'll give you 3. I have Quinn Snyder winning it.
I have him number 2. I think it's totally fair.
Yeah, Brad Stevens number 2 and Dwayne Casey number 3.
So I've got Brad Stevens number 1, Quinn Snyder number 2, Mike D'Antoni number 3.
Yeah, I had a really hard time. I had D'Antoni 4, Nate McMillan 5, if you need to know. That's
exactly where I was too with McMillan.
Mike D'Antoni is a really tricky one. I think that maybe we should just start there. You think about Coach of the Year, and you think about a guy who is kind of hollering and screaming on the sidelines and pointing around. Like, Mike D'Antoni just sort of sits there the whole game and takes it in. He does his coaching in practices, in film sessions, before the game, all that stuff. He's not a very active in-game coach. He lets his dudes do what they need to do, and the Rockets don't run what is called a beautiful system by any. It's a lot of isolation. It's a lot of 1-2 pick and roll.
Strongly disagree with that. I love it.
No, but like in the ball movement, aesthetically pleasing stuff, it's a great system. I'm not arguing that it works. Lord knows it works. But they call a lot of isolation, and that is what it is. He's not. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of tactical outsmarting. That's not the case. It just doesn't seem like it, just from the surface. I think he's going to get knocked for that, because you could very easily make the argument that Mike D'Antoni should be the Coach of the Year over what is a great class of coaches. Dwayne Casey being the third option here speaks to how good of coaching jobs some guys around the NBA have done this season. I think he's going to get knocked for not being an active coach, not being a guy who's hooting and hollering and making in-game adjustments that you can see as the guys bring the ball down the court, all that stuff. And that kind of gets to sort of the core of coaching. Do you need to be a part of the game, or is your job to put your team in the best position to win sort of without you?
I think it's definitely the latter, for what it's worth.
I think that's true, and yet I think he'll be knocked for doing that.
So Houston right now, I believe, has the 6th best offensive rating in NBA history. They're 0.4 behind last year's Golden State Warriors team. God, I hope they make a run at it in their last 2 games of the year. Just like throw caution to the wind. And
what's the matter, man? They got it locked up. Go for $150.
Go nuts. I would love it. I don't know if they'll do that though.
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this was not an easy job finding a way to assimilate Chris Paul into that locker room. Such a ball dominant player, and having him take a step back a little bit and allowing James Harden to be the guy, and still finding a way to integrate Chris Paul's unique gifts into what they want to run. And there's that. There's the fact that they're the 6th best defense in the NBA, despite the way that they play offensively.
Yeah.
Really, I think that you can make a case that D'Antoni should win the award. And to be honest, I think I'm kind of making that case to myself right now. But
it is and it isn't. I mean, he did get a major upgrade in the offseason by getting Chris Paul. I know it's a difficult thing to assimilate. You also have, 2 players that you and I never really worried about them making it fit, because Paul and Harden are such brilliant players that can both. Fucking James Harden was a shooting guard for the majority of his career. He was pushed into point guard duties last year. So it's not as if they don't know how to play together. The emergence of Clint Capella, I don't know if we thought it would be good, but certainly he was a prospect, and the ceiling was the roof for him. The Rockets are doing a lot of the same stuff they did last year, and I think a lot of people are going to attribute their jump to their roster getting better. I think that's a simplistic viewpoint, but it's going to be one. Coaching is a very difficult thing to scrutinize. So, and again, going back to the original point, D'Antoni doesn't appear to be all that active in game, and that's what people are watching. They're watching the games. They don't notice what goes on behind the scenes, and they don't notice how systems are put into place and stuff like that. I agree with you 100% that a coach's job is to put the team in a position to win without him. Then not. That's why I think Steve Kerr is a great coach, even though a lot of Warriors fans right now are pissed at Steve Kerr. He put the system in place.
Yeah,
but there's so many other
crazy to me that Warriors fans would be angry at Steve Kerr.
They didn't need to be angry about something. Let them be. But you look at I pick Quinn Snyder because that Jazz team. I mean, it kind of goes against its narrative. They lost their best player. They had to go to an unconventional offensive system comparatively to most other teams in the NBA. They're very wing heavy. They're doing it by committee. The way that they have imposed their will defensively over these last couple of months has been incredible. And this Jazz team can legitimately beat anybody in the NBA on any given night. And that's a huge leap for this squad, and one that I didn't necessarily see coming. And this is still a narrative award, and I think Quinn Snyder has done a better job with the group of men that he's got than any other coach in the NBA has done with the group of men that they've got. And while it's close, that's still sort of the separation point.
So, yeah, I mean, Quinn Snyder got a rookie who was... He was highly used last year at Louisville, but was certainly not known for his offense whenever he was at Louisville, in Donovan Mitchell, and got him ready to take on a sizable scoring load as a rookie for Utah. Joe Ingles is probably their 3rd best player.
Right.
That's awesome because Joe Ingles is awesome, but also Joe Ingles is their 3rd best player. And he is a limited basketball player in a lot of ways. And the fact that they're going to win 48 games, 49 games this year is insane to me.
Loaded West.
Loaded Western Conference after they lose Gordon Hayward, who for years was their kind of offensive creator, especially late in the shot clock. They lose Rodney Hood mid-season for Jay Crowder. They integrate Jay Crowder and get way more out of him than what Cleveland was getting out of him. Late in the season, they integrate Dante Exum, and Dante Exum looks fantastic right now for this team. Royce O'Neal went from being like out of the NBA to being a very real, like, actual rotation player for the Utah Jazz. You can go up and down this list. It's just been a remarkable season for Utah. Quinn Snyder's number 2 for me. I've got Brad Stevens at number 1. Stevens, again, loses Gordon Hayward. He's going to get 60 games out of Kyrie Irving. So basically, we're talking about at times this year, this team has been Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Marcus Morris, Terry Rozier, and they're going to win like 55 games.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but we all know Brad Stevens is a great coach.
But I think that's part of the problem with this award all the time is that people overthink it and like default to the narrative. Give the really good coaches due. I think that's what I tried to do here. Like, Dwayne Casey is fine. I'm not like talking shit about Dwayne Casey, but he still does some maddening stuff on the floor whenever he's coaching.
No doubt. But I've been impressed with the changes that he's made year over year.
Right. I agree with you. And the fact that they have gone toward more of a 3-point heavy attack this year is a legitimate adjustment that we didn't know if it would work. And it's worked like gangbusters, in large part because Casey was willing to make that adjustment. Nick Nurse has done a great job as an assistant coach implementing a scheme along with Casey that has helped that along. And it's legitimately impressive that they're at this stage. But at the same time, it's hard for me to get over the fact that Steven Snyder and D'Antoni are just ostensibly better coaches both on the floor and I think in preparation than what Dwayne Casey is. Like if you're making me pick a coach like that I'm going into a playoff series with, those 3 are way ahead of the list than Dwayne Casey is for me.
Yeah, you have to take into account it's Coach of the Year. You have to take into account the adjustments made going into this year. I think that Dwayne Casey has done a great job in saving his job. I know there's a lot of people who have been hard on Casey. I can't think of anyone who was harder on him than I was. I thought that he was holding that team back. He got out of the way this year in a lot of senses. I don't know if that was an active or a passive choice. It doesn't matter. That Raptors team took a step forward this year, and he deserves a lot of credit for that success. Nate McMillan was 5th on my list. It's tricky because again that just goes back to narrative and what was expected versus what was delivered. But Brett Brown, Terry Stotts has been unbelievable. Unbelievable. So many good options this year that I didn't have Pop or Stotts or Brett Brown on my Coach of the Year list.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
This was an exceedingly good year for coaching in the NBA. You even look like at the bottom of the league now. It's harder to find the really bad coaches in the league now as well.
Oh, yeah. Who's going to get fired this year?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out as well. I was talking to
Vogel.
I don't think he's going to get fired.
There's been throwing it out there.
Like maybe Doc leaves.
Maybe. That'd be weird.
Memphis and Phoenix are both open. So that could happen. I bet Hornacek probably goes.
Yeah, that's fair. There will be a couple, but it doesn't seem like the turnover we had. A guy that honestly I gave an ounce
Milwaukee's open too.
Oh, yeah, jeez. I gave an ounce of consideration to Kenny Atkinson as Coach of the Year. Just
Can't
because.
Do it.
No, listen. No, you can't. But I just really enjoyed watching the Nets all year, if that makes any sense. Like, they're a bad team, but they always played hard. And I don't know, I really liked watching the Nets. So it's like, Kenny, he's one of my favorites in the league. So, I at least gave it a half a second of thought.
Before we get into the, let's call them the lower end awards that I kind of don't really care about, to be honest.
Okay.
Let's go on ahead and get an advertisement here. Theater, if you've ever tried, or if you're trying, even though I know you're not because I know your girlfriend, If you've ever tried online dating, the chances are you've run into lazy text messages, dead-end conversations, and random matches that don't turn into dates. But have you seen the success stories from eHarmony? Real people, they find real matches all the time over at eHarmony. Again, I'm in a long-term relationship. You are in a long-term relationship. Yeah. But I'm sure you have friends that have used eHarmony. Mm-hmm. I certainly do out here in Los Angeles. And
sure.
They talk all the time about the ease of use, about how eHarmony tries at least to find them with a match that is compatible with them and is not as worried about just hooking up and just, going about finding someone for one night. We won't meet real significant relationships here. And eHarmony takes steps that other sites don't in order to find you that compatible match.
Huge.
They are built to help you find lasting, meaningful relationships. No shallow hookups. They've helped over 1 million people find their perfect match. eHarmony uses decades of science, data, and psychological research to send you the right matches. It brings compatible people together. There are plenty of hookup sites out there. This is not what eHarmony is. Stop waiting and start your journey to a satisfying, meaningful relationship. It can be fun to play around with online dating apps, but when you're ready to fall in love with someone and have a meaningful relationship, there's one app that is built to bring you real love. Come see how eHarmony can change your life. Go to eHarmony.com and get started. Enter my code GAMETHEORY at checkout. That's GAMETHEORY at checkout. You will get 1 month for free when you sign up for a 3-month subscription. That's promo code GAMETHEORY, GAMETHEORY at checkout. Use that and go over to eHarmony and find your love today. Let's go ahead and move on to most improved. I think it's Victor Oladipo very clearly, right?
Yep.
I had Spencer Dinwiddie number 2 and Clint Capella number 3.
Yeah, I had Julius Randle number 2.
Sure, think that's reasonable.
Then I had Dinwiddie and Clint Capella. But
sure.
I think everyone knows my love of Spencer Dinwiddie. Clint Capella was awesome this year. Even if he isn't the most versatile player in the world, he took a big leap forward. But Julius Randle is a force. He's a force to be reckoned with, man. And fascinated to see what the Lakers do with him this offseason, because he just took a huge step forward, became an impact player. Maybe not the most consistently impactful player, but just really exciting to see him flourish in the ways that he did this year, and certainly whetted my appetite for more in the future, wherever that might be.
6th man of the year here with Lou Williams, Eric Gordon, Fred Van Vliet.
Mm-hmm.
Is that who you had?
Yeah, you know what? I tried to get Will Barton in there. I tried to get Terry Rozier in there.
I tried to get Rozier as well.
Yeah, but ultimately Sweet Lou's going to win it. And then I had Van Vliet second, just on the basis of I think the Raptors bench is the best in basketball, and
it's like one of the best lineups in basketball. It's crazy.
Yeah. So and he is the captain of that unit in my eyes. So I wanted to give him a little extra bump for that. Ultimately, it's not a team award. It's not the 6th men award. So it has to be Sweet Lou. But Van Vliet certainly deserving of a second place vote in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, Van Vliet, I love that dude unconditionally. Just he's so great.
He's you want to talk about impact, man. I've probably said it about 10,000 times already, but he brings it. He brings it every time he's on the court.
So let's talk about the last award here. It is the most hotly contested because the fan bases for this award have decided to just wage all-out war upon each other on the internet.
Shocker.
Jason Tatum is 3rd on my list. Do we agree with that?
Yeah, I have Jason Tatum on my list. Yeah, he's 3rd, and he's real good. So that's crazy, but he's 3rd.
2nd and 1st. I have Ben Simmons for Rookie of the Year. I have Ben Simmons winning this award. I have Donovan Mitchell 2nd. They would both be Rookie of the Year in, 90% of Rookie of the Years?
99.
Voting? Yeah.
These are 2 of the best rookies ever. I mean, they're quite incredible what they're doing. This is going to be a narrative thing. I ultimately think that.
Well, I feel like the narrative is kind of backing Mitchell right now because he's led the Jazz on this run. I think Simmons is going to win. 16 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists a night. Super high level defense. I don't know that I'd say all NBA level defense, but very, very good defense nonetheless. Mitchell is a solid defender, I would say. He's not as good as Simmons. Simmons is just more impactful due to the way he can defend multiple positions, the way that he is a legitimate difference maker on that end. Mitchell ends up having to conserve a little bit of energy to take on the high usage level that he does offensively. It's, they're both ridiculous. I think Simmons is the obvious winner, despite their ridiculousness. But at the same time, look, I'm not going to sit here and disparage what Donovan Mitchell's done this year. He's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. No, I don't. I want to give this award to Mitchell. I want to, because of what he's been able to do for a Jazz team that didn't have a guy like him heading into this season, and him stepping up and taking that role and exceeding everyone's expectations. He has been outstanding all year. But Ben Simmons looks like an all-timer. And he's already playing at an all-NBA level. Yep. That's it. That's the argument.
So here's the number I can give you. Not just among rookies, among players all time. Players who have averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists a game. Wilt Chamberlain, James Harden, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Oscar Robertson, Russell Westbrook. Ben Simmons is about to do it.
That seems good.
Yeah, I can't get past that, I would say. That's what I can't get past. Right.
No, that's it. I mean, and this late season spurt, I think, has cemented it. It's really quite impressive. Did you put together a rookie first and second team?
I did not. I mean, I can do it off the top of my head. I have Donovan Mitchell, Ben Simmons, Kyle Kuzma, Jason Tatum, and who would be my center?
Lauri Markkanen.
Be my center. Lauri Markkanen, yeah, pretty clearly.
Yeah. Second team was tough, man. I'll tell you. I left Lonzo Ball off of this.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. He's pretty good.
I know. But John Collins, Dennis Smith, Bogdan, Bam, OG. Some really good rookies this year, man.
It's been a great rookie class. I mean, my second team, I would go Lonzo and Dennis as the second team guards. Yeah. Forwards.
Do you have Josh Jackson as a forward on that?
I would probably want to have Josh Jackson on that list, to be honest. I think Josh Jackson's been really, really good, basically since late January. Yeah.
Bogdan, he could be a small forward on that team.
Yeah.
It's tough. Luke Kennard, pretty damn good.
I'm cool without Luke.
I think you could. No, listen. I think you could absolutely make the list without Luke. I'm just giving you a name.
Yeah, no. I know. I'd probably want to get John Collins on there, and I'd probably want to get.
I think you have to have OG on there.
Maybe.
He's so impactful defensively, man. He's fun.
He's useful. Man, it gets hard. It gets really hard whenever getting down to this. Like Jarrett Allen has been unbelievable.
Yeah, I love Jarrett Allen
for the last 2 months.
He's better than Bam.
Probably not, though.
Probably
to be
not.
honest, yeah, Bam's been better probably than Jarrett Allen has.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you get Dylan Brooks on that list somewhere?
Yeah, right.
You probably have to be honest. Dylan Brooks has played more minutes than all but 3 other rookies this year.
He's been tantalizing. Sure.
He's been I don't know why he's playing as many minutes as he is, but he's holding them down in a reasonable way.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, in a better situation, it probably looks better, but the flashes are pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, here's what I will say. I would go. Here's my official second team. Now that I've thought it through.
Thank you.
I would go Lonzo Ball, Dennis Smith, Josh Jackson, John Collins at center, and probably Bogdan, and leave Dylan Brooks off.
Good year for rookies.
It's been a really good year for rookies. Been a really, really good year for rookies. Yeah, I mean, this is a ridiculous year overall, I think, in the NBA.
I think that's what we learned from the last 90 minutes or so, or whatever it's been, that it hasn't been very clear-cut. Some years are just clear-cut, and the only argument you're having is over, a guy on the second or third team, if he should be on or off. This year was a word scramble for some of this stuff. I mean, the easiest one was sixth man, and there were still 5 guys that you could make the case for. So
yeah, no question. I mean, this is an awesome year. This is an absolutely awesome year in the NBA, and the playoffs are going to be even better, I think, once we get them going. Dieter, tell the people what's going on in your life. Tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, well, Warrior season's starting up, and that's where I make my money. So, Bay Area news
season is now starting.
Yeah. I've been working it since September, but now we can get into what the good stuff is. San Jose Mercury News. They have a website. I'm sure you can find it. You can just search my name at D Kurtenbach on the Twitter. If you enjoy random across the board commentary and booty had me like jokes.
Yeah, Dieter is pretty good at just making the random comment and joke on Twitter. Please go follow him on Twitter. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, whatever podcasting app you use. Also, if you subscribe, I wouldn't mind you leaving a rating and review. It's really helpful to getting the word out about the podcast. We'll be back later this week with a playoff preview of some sort. I'm excited to figure out what these matchups are because I really have no idea what they're going to be. I don't think anyone does going down the stretch here because of all the awesome games that are coming on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Shout out also to Andre Ingram. That is the coolest story I think I've heard in the NBA all season. Guy spent 11 years in the G League and is now getting a chance to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. Is, I think, the all-time leading three-point shooter in G League history. The fact that this guy stayed in the G League for so long is crazy. There's no money in the G League. He was doing it to stay in America and stay for the love of the game, and now he is about to get to live out his dream with the Lakers. It's awesome, and I hope he goes for like 20 tonight. That'd be just amazing.
How about 50, baby?
Go for 50.
No caps. Give him the ball. Kobe's last game.
I'm all in on this. This is the greatest idea ever.
Yeah.
Until next time, though, big ups Lakers. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.